Okay, so today we're going to mulch this garden. It's hard to even see that it's a garden or what's going on. That's because this was established in a patch of mugwort that was like this tall for 3 years running. I never touched it, and then we tried to get all the mugwort roots out, which you can't really do, and we planted a lot of stuff in here, and this garden is actually crazy productive, and there's an unbelievable amount of good stuff in here. I'll do a more thorough tour of it once we mulch it, but like this is Phylostachys nigra, which is a black timber bamboo. We've got a bed here that should come up soon that is all yacon. There's a couple varieties, sea berries next to Myoga ginger coming up, miscanthus grass, sochan, apricots, compass plant, couple of nut species. Those are juglans, probably Carpathian walnut, and black currants, and just so much good stuff in here. And so what we're gonna do right now is this is pretty late in the game. We should have mulched this a little while ago, but we just got the hay recently, and hay is the best for this. So what we're gonna do right now, we've got perennial weeds coming up through perennial plantings, which is that's kind of like the most challenging scenario to deal with. Let's take a look at this patch right here, for example. This is a perfect example of something that's just a hard situation to deal with. You can't really you can kind of weed out the mugwort a little bit, but disturbing the roots there enough to get them out will disturb the plant that we're trying to grow. So what we're gonna do here is we're just going to bend over the weeds that we don't want, cover them with mulch, and leave the other ones intact. So let me just show you how I do this. With square bales, what I do, okay, let's zoom in here for a second. What I do is I find the knots and I cut right next to one of the knots. And then what that allows you to do is to keep the strings useful and organized. So then you just take the knots in your hand and you pull them through. We want this hay is gonna get used right here. So that allows you to pull them through really easily. And then every time I pull the strings off, I just put them in the middle like this, and then I'll hang them on something. And then so at the end of your mulching, you've got these nicely organized strings, all with the knots on one end, and you can cut the knots off if they're in the way. But that allows you, now you have nice string. We use these for a bunch of other things, as opposed to like, if you just do it haphazardly, there's invariably just string all over the place. So we'll keep those aside. I'll put something to hang those on. And basically what we're gonna do, the process is going to be more or less getting these big flakes of hay. And this hay is we got pretty lucky here. This is actually, you can see there's no weeds in here. This is just grass. And the grass got silted last year, so it got too much silt on it from a flood. So it was from a beef farmer. They would actually, this is like feed quality, but the cows won't eat it because it's got too much silt on it. So anyway, we won't see any weeds coming out of this hay, but even if, I use weedy hay all the time and that's not a problem either. But so we're just gonna be stepping the mugwort over and covering it with a big chunk of hay. So we're gonna definitely go through a lot of hay doing this. That's the big drawback, is that it's a very intensive use of mulch, but we're just gonna go through, step it over, and cover. And that will set the mugwort back quite a bit. It's not gonna like, obviously, end the mugwort in this scenario, but we'll do that. It allows you to work around the plants that you want to support them and really slow down the plants you don't want without doing any soil disturbance, because these guys right now are putting out culms like this. This culm is probably a week old from the ground. So they're really in like a high growth state and we don't want to mess the roots up. So we'll check in a couple times as we're going, and then we'll show the finished product of the garden after mulching.
We're not gonna do much harm in the bed.
So in a situation like this, we'll just bend all these mugworts over, get them really flat on the ground, and then cover that whole thing with a bunch of hay. And then we're not disturbing any roots. And one important thing too is that if you cut the mugwort shoot, or this goes for most perennial weeds, if you cut it or pull it out, that signals to the root system to activate other shoots. Whereas if you leave that shoot intact and just bend it over, it will keep the energy alive in that shoot and keep it trying to grow. And they pretty much grow straight, so they can't grow through this. So they'll get stuck and waste a lot of energy under that mulch. Whereas if you cut it and mulch it with the same amount of mulch, they can start a new shoot from the ground and grow straight up through the mulch much more easily. This even applies, we've got a really big yellow dock here that's about to go to seed. And even then, you can just bend it over, cover it with hay. Because a yellow dock that big, you can't really dig it out. Or if you wanted to dig it out, it would be a huge project and you really wouldn't get all of it anyway.
Got a little mugwort baby going there.
One thing on attire, it is nice. You can see she's got her pants over the boot. Yep. It's very nice to not be getting little particles of hay in your socks. If you were to check my socks, you would see that most of them have particles of hay and wood chips in them, because I don't always follow this rule. But if you do get nice and prepared, then you just take...
The end of your day is a little bit nicer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No itchy ankles.
So we'll just keep going until this is all covered, and then that weed will pretty much disappear. And as it rots down, it's really great for the soil. Even with perennial grasses like orchard grass here that's gone to seed, in fact, it seems like when plants have gone to seed like this, it's maybe even more effective, because they have, they've switched over their growth pattern away from the vegetative and in towards the reproductive. And if you just bend it over like that, flat on the ground, get all these seed heads laying down. And I mean, you could do this any day, but it's fortuitous that we're doing it today because everything is soaked. We got enormous rains over the past day or two. So we're gonna create conditions under hay for this thing to rot out supremely well. And the seeds are not viable yet, and even if they were, you just cover it with another inch of hay, and then they're not gonna make it up through that. So it's incredibly effective. It's my favorite way to deal with weeds. But like I said, for this garden here, we've only done this bed so far, and we've already gone through 4 bales. So it does use a lot of hay, but the bales we got are for $4. So it's only $16 worth of mulching. Pretty good deal. So we've been out here for less than an hour, and I would say we're realistically halfway done, but well, maybe more realistically, we're completely done, although we should be only halfway done because I don't know if we're gonna get back to this garden as soon as we should. But anyway, I just wanted to cover a little bit of what happened. So we continued that style of mulching pretty much all the way around the garden. This here is a patch of basket willow and hybrid poplar. These things have put on this much growth in the past couple weeks, and they probably, in another year or two, they'd be 15, 20 feet tall. They're pretty incredible plants. I don't always plant things in rows. It's sometimes pretty haphazard, so we couldn't really mulch easily in there. So we did end up pulling some mugwort out, and they sort of look like this with some soil on. These are absolutely can live, so we made them into a pile here, and then we're going to cover that with more mulch later. That'll pretty much put those to bed. So with the more widely spaced plants, it's pretty easy to get a pretty good coverage, and we may not really have to do much more for the currants in particular this whole season. As you can see, there's still some mugwort here or there. We've got to figure that out at some point, but just wanted to show a couple other plants. This here is actually sweetgrass, which is pretty incredible, and went to seed here. I think we're going to try to harvest the seeds and see if we can propagate, although it's an extremely easy plant. It's like a rhizome grass. You plant one, I think this was just like 4 or 5 little plugs that I planted here. I grew those from seed, and they've expanded, and they're, you know, all the way out there now, so they're very easy to propagate. Over here on the other side, there's a huge piece of ledge in the middle of this garden, so we pile all the rocks up on there. Have a pretty hot little habitat for reptiles and stuff, snakes and other things. These are triple crown thornless blackberries. This is the new shoot just from the ground this spring. They might get this tall and then bend over. And I just let them bend over. As you can see, this is right in the pathway, but they've already started tip layering here. So I pretty much just let these shoots go up and over, land in the pathway somewhere, which is wood chips and hay, and they root out into that. And then I cut the stem going towards the root, and we've got our new plants. And this little patch will probably produce 20 to 30 plants with absolutely no care. I mean, not even doing the layering, just they layer themselves. They will produce 30 or 40 new propagules actually automatically. So it's an automatic income generating machine, pretty much. Just kidding. Here are some apricots that probably shouldn't be here still, but they are. They're gonna grow another season in here and get way too big. These just put on this much growth in the past 3 weeks. Basically, we got this huge flush of growth with the warm temperatures that came out of nowhere. So we're gonna have some pretty big apricots. Over here, we've got our propagation areas of, this is sweet Sicily, Murris odorata, and this is the best time to eat the seeds. They're these little green seeds that are just so sweet. They like are really a candy. They taste like licorice. This is the Sochan. For most of the spring, they're about this tall, beautiful cut leaf green, and now they're going to seed. They're still edible. Better to cook them at this point because they're a little bit more tough. And we've got some valerian flowering in there. And over there is the propagation bed of, that's the Miyoga ginger, Zingiber Miyoga, which is a northern Japanese variety of ginger that produces edible flowers in the fall and has wintered out here 2 seasons with no problem. It's theoretically rated at zone 7, but we're zone 6A, 5B borderline here, and they've been completely fine. And then here we've got a couple, these are Carpathian walnuts. This is an odd planting. The main planting is up at the larger spot, and these are 2-year-old seedlings that all got damaged, and I try to take the damaged ones and replant them, and most of them did take. So yeah, we probably will have to come through here one more time through the season. Well, another couple bales of mulch to get the edges and a few other places where we didn't get quite enough down. But probably one more time in the season we'll do a re-up on mulching, and that'll be it for this garden for the whole season. Just a couple other thoughts. It's always nice to have some harvesting when you're doing some garden work, so There's some spring garlic we're gonna cook for lunch and dinner. I try to make it, all the gardens have something that have, well, you can harvest something almost any time of the year, even if it's just a leafy green or something like this, because it makes the whole experience a lot more enjoyable. And then one other word about mulching. So transporting hay can be a real issue. So we have this little tractor and we can fit 15 bales on this thing. Here's all the string that we get off the bales. But if you don't have a good way to move bales, then it's up to hands and wheelbarrows, which is not impossible, but it can make it a little bit more daunting. Like this garden, we just put 10 bales, small square bales in here, and it could probably take another 5 to do it really well. If we put another 10 in here, so 20 total, we would probably not have to, basically not have to weed another time this entire season. It probably would be good for the whole year, which at $4 a piece, that would still be by far and away an incredibly high value of mulching. So it's just that it does weigh a lot, and if you have to transport them really far, it can make it significantly more difficult. So I just wanted to be transparent and say that's what we use for moving the hay around. And if you don't have something like this, but you have a car or a truck, then it's important to think about the access. So because this is a 4-wheel drive tractor, we can get back here in this awkward space no problem, where a truck or especially a 2-wheel drive car might get stuck pretty easily. So you have to think about that delivery of mulch to the garden beds. It's just as important as doing the actual mulching. As an aside, these are spring garlic. So these are tiny cloves, or even if you just plant a full head of garlic that didn't get big enough, you just plant that out somewhere, maybe not with your main garlic planting even, although it could be. But I just plant them out in places where I want them. Maybe the smell will protect a tree or something like that. And then in the spring, you go harvest these clumps, and they're these beautiful, super tasty, mild garlics. And I don't have anything against ramps, but you know, this is an annual production here. It's an enormous amount of garlic. And to get a ramp this big takes like 6 years or something like that. So I don't believe that over-harvesting of ramps is actually a serious problem. I mean, Samuel Thayer just recently did a video that you might want to check out about, you know, some more realistic assessment of ramps habitat, which is actually pretty darn inspiring and hopeful. But if you just want to eat something that tastes really good and like an allium, just plant out your full heads of tiny garlic all around your fruit trees or wherever, and just harvest them in the spring. It's delicious.